You were great, Lord.
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
You're going to have to bear with this.
Come on, bro.
The service was worth it already this morning. As I sat there and I watched Gio take the Lord's Supper.
Amen.
That was neat. That was neat. Thank you, by the way, for the phone calls, the emails, and so forth, your prayers. Pretty sick this week. Still pretty sick. Although I got some halfway good news for you. I'm on antibiotics, so if it's a germ, you're not in any danger of being contagious. The other part of the news is, if it's viral, and Dr. O says it most likely is, if you're within 15 feet of me, you're dead meat. But hopefully you're not. Hopefully it's not contagious. Now, nobody else in the family has gotten it. I think they're poisoning me. I don't know. One other thing I'll say about this, I think that disease of this nature ought to be only for women. Now let me tell you why. If Kay had this, she'd be out shopping, going about her business, doing things. I'm incapacitated. It's not right. And then you get this, have you guys ever heard this argument? You talk about some medical procedure or something, and you hear this, well, you've never had a baby.
Yeah.
You heard that?
Yeah.
What's that all about? Yeah, that's no good. But anyway, yeah, can't be that bad. Lost half the audience right there. No, I'm sure it is. I'll have to tell you about my Lamaze method with Kay sometime. It was absolutely useless for her because I forgot everything. Well, let me get as far into this sermon as I can. Several years ago, when I worked for the Boston Globe, I worked for them for 13 years, and I supervised a department, and a management position came open, and me and another guy, a guy that worked for me, applied for the job. Well, this guy was mediocre in his job. He was not a good worker. And I was confident I had the best department of this nature at the Boston Globe. I thought, I am a shoo-in for this job. And so we applied. And usually after you apply, they do all the reading of your resume and so forth, and then they let you know the next day who got hired. Well, this went on for about 4 days. They couldn't make up their mind. And I was really puzzled by that. And finally, on the 4th day, they came out and said, David Smith, I'll call him, David Smith is our new manager. And I thought, how did that happen? And then I put it together a little bit later on. And this is part of what I want to talk about this morning. David was great friends with the top manager at the Globe. They went to ball games together. They were in each other's homes. They knew each other's families. There was a connection. And to this day, I think that's the main reason David got the job. That my resume didn't make much difference when you've got a friendship involved. And later I found out in the human resources that they said that human resources wanted to hire me, but this upper manager said, no, I want David in there. And they argued about it for about 4 days. And finally, this upper management got his way. Connection makes a lot of difference in this world. You know, they say, and I don't know how true this is, I suspect it's true, that most people get the jobs they get because they know somebody, or somebody that they know knows somebody, rather than you just handing in your resume and giving a very outstanding resume. It's who you know many times. It's that connection. Relationships. Last week I talked about the importance of relationships. This week I want to talk about how we can build great relationships. But I want to talk first of all a little bit more about the importance of it. Look at the political scene today. And I want you to think about some of our political leaders from the past. Now, I don't know whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Put that aside for the moment as to whether, I can't stand Republicans or I can't stand Democrats. Just put that aside for a moment.
Yes.
How would you rank Jimmy Carter as an effective president? Most would not rank him very high. Nixon, the same way. These guys were not relational guys. Jimmy Carter was a nuclear scientist. He was a nuclear engineer, trained with the man that invented nuclear submarines. He was a brilliant man, but he got a lot less done than most presidents do. And he just never had the connection because he was not a relational person. Nixon was very much the same way. And today, some of the criticism of Obama is that he doesn't make connections with people. I saw a guy interviewed the other day that said that he had made several times, he tried to get with Obama. He's a senator, and he never got an invitation. He was never invited to the White House for anything. And he's known for just not having personal relationships with the people that are trying to run the country in Congress. Now, that's a small thing. There are other factors involved. But you go back and you look at some of the relational presidents. You look at Bill Clinton. He got a little too relational at times. But he was a relational president. They say that Newt Gingrich was an ideological nemesis to him, but they got along because they built somewhat of a friendship, mainly through Bill Clinton. And he would work with Congress, and he'd call people. Lyndon Johnson, the same way, considered to be one of the greatest legislators our country's ever had. He would get on the phone and he would call the opposition and say, listen, I'm trying to pass this. And he would talk to them. And they built friendships. He had them over, took them down to his Texas ranch and so forth. And then there was Ronald Reagan. Oh, thank you. I've got some up here. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. But Ronald Reagan, I saw a thing where Mikhail Gorbachev, head of the Soviet Union a long time ago, was interviewed. He was at the UN and he was going to be interviewed. And before the interview started, he said, just call me Mikhail instead of President Gorbachev or whatever. And then he said, I learned that from Ronald Reagan. He said, when Ronald Reagan and I met, one of the first things he said to me, he says, we need to be on a first name basis. Call me Ron. And he made a connection. And that connection changed our world.
Yes.
And if it hadn't have made that connection, it wouldn't have changed the world. And the thing that I'm trying to point out here is that some of us are more relational than others of us. It doesn't make any difference if I compare myself with Reggie or Raul or anybody else. It's what I can do to change and become more relational and connect with people. That's so important for us as Christians. Here's another one. Thomas Harrell, professor of applied psychology at Stanford University, the Graduate School of Business, set out to identify the traits of his Stanford's most successful alumni. And after studying people who had been gone from the school for 10 years, he found this. He said, grade point average didn't make any difference. Isn't that amazing?
Yep.
Grade point average didn't make any difference. But there was one trait that did make a great deal of difference. They were people who he had said had verbal fluency, but here's what he means by that. They were the ones who built the businesses and climbed the corporate ladder with amazing speed. And they were known as people who could make a conversation with anyone in any situation. Investors, customers, bosses posed no more of a threat to them than colleagues and secretaries and friends. Whether they were in front of an audience or at a dinner or in a cab, these people knew how to connect. They knew how to talk. Now, isn't that amazing that can be that important? It's not just success. Think about the church. God designed the church to be relational. for us to make connections with one another.
That's right.
God never designed the church, as I said last week, for us to be lone rangers out here on a creek bank talking to God just by ourselves and never interacting with anybody else. He made us to be brothers and sisters. He made us to interact with one another in our lives. And with outsiders, Paul wrote this. He said, be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace. That is, people enjoy talking to you. Seasoned with salt, with some meaning in it, so that you may know how to answer everyone. It says of the early church, and I read this passage last week in Acts chapter 2, 42 and 43, that those early Christians devoted themselves, among other things, to the fellowship. Another translation says, to our life together. They devoted themselves to our life together, and the meaning that everyone has. It says, they broke bread in their homes, they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Do you think that had anything to do with the growth of the church? That they ate together, that they enjoyed being together, that they had these connections?
That's right.
Absolutely it did. They were adding their numbers. People were attracted to what they saw in the church. The writer of Hebrews says, let's consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let's not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another. And all the more as you see the day approaching. Paul wrote in Romans, I myself am convinced, my brothers, that you yourselves are full of goodness, complete in knowledge, and competent to instruct one another. And all the one another passages presuppose that there's going to be a web of relationships within the body of Christ. You know, we have a lot of that in this congregation.
Yep,
We have a lot of it. A lot of things going on that we may not even hear about. I heard Reggie and them had a game night with his family group. Is that right, Reggie?
That's right.
Or was that just a rumor? But I heard it. Somebody just said that was fantastic. Somebody that was there. I think it was Martine. No. But they said it was just really outstanding. You know why? Because it was connecting. You're learning to grow and to know each other. You think about the impact of the early church from relational men, beginning with Jesus. You know, Jesus changed the world by his relationships with 12 men. He changed the world because of his love for them and their love for him and that connection that he made with them, that he called them his friends. And they went out and continued his ministry. But he had a core of disciples. Peter, James, and John seemed to have been more kind of an inner circle, although he was close to all of them. And then he was close to Lazarus. He was close to Mary and Martha and a host of others. Jesus was a relational person.
Yes.
That God sent him not as a scholar, not as somebody that was going to introduce just the greatest teaching in the world. He came as a relational person to connect with people of this world. Paul was a relational man. You look at the book of Romans at the very end of it, and you look at all of Paul's friends. They're in Rome. He's never been to Rome. But these are people that he's converted, that he's been friends with and brothers with and worked with. He was relational. And the elders of the church cried when Paul said, you're never going to see me again, because of the connection between them. Peter seems to have been a leader among the disciples. On the day of Pentecost, he's the one that led the way. Now, which one would you identify with the most out of the disciples as being relational? It would be Peter. Peter was just Peter. And we love him. And we're drawn to him. But he was relational. I bet the disciples, I bet he had to pull his foot out of his mouth so many times. But people loved him because he had that connection. Who has the greatest impact on changing lives today? Of the 11 baptisms we've had this year and so forth, It's those among us who are relational in nature, who make connections with people. I mean, we had a visitor, Mohandas had a visitor here that he talked to, I guess lying on your back on a dialysis couch. And the guy came here and visited church, a school bus driver. That's a gift of connecting with people. Raul's the same way. And others of you are the same way. It's the relational. And all of us, I may never be a Raul, but I can grow in my ability to connect with other people.
Amen.
Well, how can we do that? How can we grow in this? Well, first of all, we can, maybe ask this question, why don't we grow in this area? And I think one of the things is that we don't think we need to grow in that area.
That's right.
It's not something we really have really determined to do. I'm content with just living my life and not being bothered by the messiness of other people's lives and so forth. Some of us might say to ourselves, I don't have time for that. That's almost that, I ain't got time for that. You know, that's an excuse that we use a lot of times. And we don't have a lot of time. It is precious. Our lives change. You know, most of us came from singles and colleges, and we had great relationships.
Yes.
And now we're married and we have children, we have greater responsibilities. It takes a lot more effort
That's right.
in that area.
Yes.
Some people say, well, that's just not my thing. It's not my gift. It may not be. But that doesn't mean you can't be more relational and have an impact on other people. Some people might say, well, I've had bad experiences in the past. I've been hurt, and I don't want to get close to people again.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the characteristics of somebody that's relational, is they're willing to be vulnerable.
Yes.
You will get hurt if you try to get close to people. You
Yeah.
will get hurt.
That's right.
But think of the lives that you'll change that you won't get hurt by if you don't give up and make those connections. Some of us are just insecure. We're afraid we're going to say something wrong or do something wrong or stick our foot in our mouth about something. Well, relational people do that. That's just part of being relational. We don't always say the perfect thing. We don't always say it just right. And some might say, well, it just takes too much effort. But it's so much worth the effort. How can I increase my desire to be relational? We need to have a conviction that God has called us to be relational.
Amen.
Amen.
To each other,
Right.
to the lost, to the people in our world. It's the key to spiritual survival.
Yes, it's true.
I can tell you, if somebody's not connected to other parts of the body, it is just a matter of time until they die spiritually. They'll sputter along for a while, and then they'll die spiritually because they have no connection. Nothing is helping them to grow and change. We need to have a conviction about that, and not only about our own survival, about other people's survival.
Amen.
We need to look after those who don't have those connections. It's the key to spiritual impact, as I've said. It's key to helping other people. Is learning to be relational. It'll bless our lives and it'll bless the lives of other people. What are some of the qualities that relational people need to have? Well, they need to be willing to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable. You know what? You may reach out to somebody. When Mohandas reached out to that bus driver, the bus driver said, I don't want anything to do with that. That could have happened. And I'll bet it has happened on occasion with somebody you reach out to. No, I'm not interested. I'm all set. And you're going to get that sometimes. But you're also going to find people, I've been looking, I've been searching.
That's right.
And you build a friendship and you build a connection. People that are relational in nature care about people. they really genuinely, it's like Paul said about Timothy, I don't have anybody else who genuinely cares about other people. And that's one of the things that probably holds some of us back. We don't genuinely care what happens to other people. We've got our own lives. We've got our own interests. And I don't really care that much. We need to grow in our caring if we're going to be relational in nature. Relational people are fun to be around. I'll bet Peter was fun to be around, just to watch him. The guys that are relational in the congregation, they're really, you know who I'm talking about. They're fun to be around. That's relational people. They're willing to serve and to be put out. They're willing to use up their time and give of themselves. They initiate. You know, I mentioned last week, we're either bowling balls or we're bowling pins. Bowling pins are just sitting there waiting for the ball to hit them, for something to happen. The bowling ball is active. It's going after something. Which are you? Are you a bowling ball or a bowling pin in regard to relationships? I hear people say sometimes, I just wish I had a relationship, a close relationship. My first question would be, what have you done to initiate that relationship? What have you done? And if you just did a few things, relationships take time and effort to build. I remember JP saying to us when he spoke over here one time, he said, how long did it take me to build a 10-year friendship? And he said, 10 years. And we look back, and some of us, we look back at our old relationships and they're priceless to us. But what did we do? What did we put into those relationships?
Oh, that's right.
And are we still willing to put that kind of effort into relationships today?
Come on.
What are some of the things, practical things that we can do to build closer relationships? One-on-one discipling.
That's right.
You know, several of you get together on a regular basis. I get together with JP over in Orlando. We get together every Wednesday morning. And we talk, we ask advice, we help each other in our lives. We talk about our marriages, we're open with each other. That's a priceless, we've built such a great friendship. Nobody told us, you guys need to get together and be best friends. We found each other. You have to find somebody that you can have that kind of friendship with. And I have friendships of other people in the congregation as well. But one-on-one discipling, things like having cookouts and game nights and group prayer times and playing golf together, praying together, double dating. When's the last time you went out on a double date with another couple? Men and women's events, retreats, take advantage of them. Special groups. You know, now this is my name for our group. We're starting a group. It's called the Old Geezers Domino Group. And it has me, Papa Joe, and Mohandas. And we've let a young guy come in that he's not a full member, and that's Gerald. But we're going to get together and we're going to play dominoes. You think anything will happen at that domino game? We'll learn to love each other even more and talk about things. We will probably cure all the world's problems right there at that domino game. You know, there's all kinds of things we do. Meals in our homes. You have a meal with somebody, your relationship is never the same.
Yes.
It's never the same. Are we opening up our homes? I know many of you are. But it's a way. Open up your home. Have somebody over. Coffee at Starbucks or someplace. Some of the best conversations I've had were at Starbucks over a cup of coffee. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about having some time just to yuck it up with a brother and discuss about some things going on in our lives. Serving somebody, helping somebody. Doing small things. I went out, I got a guy that lives across the street now. He's a new neighbor. And he was out working on his truck. And it was getting dark. And he had taken the differential out of the whole back wheels off of it. And I just went over to him and I said, I've got a lantern that you can use to give you some light. And I introduced myself. And you know, every time I come out of my house and I see him, Hey, James. Hey, Greg. You know, we made a connection. And I'm going to hopefully have him at church one of these days. Breakfast together, prayer walks and prayer times. Some of you guys are known for taking prayer walks and going out with another brother and just praying. And sisters. Hang time. Here's a good one. Answer your phone. We don't do that much anymore, you know it? We don't do that much anymore. We rely on emails and so forth. And I do that too. But you know what? We're missing something. We're getting so we don't touch each other's lives.
Yeah.
Phone calls. As you go about your business, invitations, golf, counseling, and a host of all kinds of different things. The imagination. But building relationships and friendships is fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's rewarding. It's rewarding. And we all can do it. We all can do it. Some are better at it than others. And you know what? We need to talk to those guys and pick their brain and say, what do you do? How do you do that? Dorlin and Joe, what? You moved in and your neighbor's already studying the Bible with you. How'd that happen? How do we do that?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just talking, isn't it? It's just introducing yourself and just talking. A relational church will not only survive, it will thrive.
Yep.
The future of this congregation is not in the preaching. It's not in the song service. It's in the relationships we build.
That's right.
And how we work together and love each other and serve together and reach out to others. If we ever lose the relational side, I don't care how big we get, it's dead. Relationships, relationships, relationships. Here's my challenge to you. This week, I want you to look at your week in terms of think relational. When you go to work Monday, think relationally, not transactionally where you're just going to get something done through somebody else. Think relationally of going up and learning something about somebody in the office that you work with. Or get a cup of coffee with your boss or with one of your workers or somebody. Build a relationship. Reach out to a neighbor. Take them something. Brothers and sisters, reach out to one another. It excites me every time, and I hear so often about so-and-so getting together with so-and-so and having a great time. That's healthy. That's righteous. I hear about the Dorvals having people over and having a great birthday celebration or whatever. That's building relationships. I hear about double dating, Frankie and Yvonne, with somebody. I don't remember who you double dated with, but anyway, that's good. The church needs to be made up of a web of relationships that just grows stronger as the years go by. And we can't do it with everybody, but we can do it with some.
Yes.
And build those relationships. Relationships, relationships, relationships. If you're a relational person, you have one of the greatest gifts. And it's one that most people don't think much about. But it's a great gift. And whether we're relationally gifted or not, we can become more gifted.
Yeah.
We can do more. And it'll have a tremendous impact. Amen?
Amen. Amen.
Amen.